Just a quick heads up before we start. On Sandwiched, we talk honestly about life, loss, and caregiving. That means conversations may touch on topics such as death and grief. We invite you to listen with care, and please do step away if you need to. Well, good morning, everybody. It's Paul Richardson, host of Sandwiched. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome with us today Samantha Bates. Samantha is a corporate professional and a devoted family caregiver. She balances a full-time job while caring for her mother, her 3 children with special needs, all under one roof. Her life is a masterclass in resilience, love, and family, with a calendar that runs from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. daily, and little room for anything else. It's my pleasure to welcome Samantha to the show. Samantha, how are you doing this morning?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good, good. Sam, as we get started, I just realized I did it. Do you prefer Sam or Samantha for our audience?
Either or is fine.
Okay, fantastic. Well, again, Sam, welcome. Would you mind sharing with our audience a little about yourself and what a typical day in the life of Sam looks like today?
Well, much like others in my situation, every day is different. We do have a basic routine, but it starts early. And for me, because I work a corporate job, I do a lot of my caregiving tasks before my workday starts, so that during my work day, I can try to stay as focused as possible. And then in the evening, then I'm focused on additional caregiving tasks. So when I get up in the morning, I'll feed the dog food and, check on my daughter's bathroom, clean up anything for her that has happened during the night because she doesn't have the physical ability to do that. And then I'll do various different things to kind of be ready for my day and then work. And caregiving is 24/7. Sometimes, in the middle of my workday, something happens that I have to step away and take care of it. Last night, my daughter had a problem at 4 a.m. I had to get up out of bed
Oh,
at
no.
4 a.m. to take care of it. And, you just have to kind of be prepared for anything, everything. And I think as you get further in your day and further in your journey, you're better able to cope with the unknown. And so in the evening, I carve out 30 minutes to get some exercise for myself. And my oldest son has work during the day, and then he has school at night. And so I'm taking to and from, and just, kind of seeing how their day is and how I can support them better. And my mom's currently not here right now. She's on a short vacation, but she'll be back. So my day would include several check-ins with her to see how she's doing, what she needs. But I do everything: grocery shopping, taking her to doctor's appointments, whatever she needs to have done, going to the pharmacy. If she needs help with cleaning, most of the time I do it. And so it's a wild day.
It
Every
is a
day is kind
wild
of an
day.
adventure.
Yes, an adventure. And it sounds to me like it's kind of relentless, right? Like there's really not many breaks and lots of unanticipated moments.
Right.
But I think to your point, the further along that folks are in their sandwiched life and their kind of caregiving roles and balancing, if there is any balance, as much as they can in trying to manage it all, I think you learn to block and tackle a little bit better.
Right.
But I mean, even more so, like it's early for you, and to know that you were already up at 4 a.m, just sincerely, Sam, thanks for being here with us. We appreciate it. And, I know it will resonate with listeners who probably have had very similar situations. So really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure.
I want to take us back to a few different areas kind of in some of our early conversations. And I thought where we'd start is let's go back, a handful of years now and talk about COVID and when you and your family decided to consolidate homes to kind of really help navigate balancing it all. Tell us a little about that.
I think that was actually a lot of just plain miracles. When we bought our home, my mom and dad's home sold quickly, and the place that we were in was going to be reoccupied soon. And so when COVID hit, it kind of threw a wrench in everything. And so my parents had no place to live. So in the home that we were in, we moved them into our home. And we just it was just challenge after challenge. But my dad had knee replacement surgery, and 2 days later, my mom fell and broke her L1 vertebrae. And thankfully, we had just been all sent home. My husband and I both work for IT companies, and so we have the ability to work remotely. And so that was a huge blessing for us to be home so that I could step away any moment that I needed, that I could make sure they got food and their clothes were washed and their room was clean and just doctor's appointments and all that. And so I got kind of a crash course in what it was like to be a sandwich caregiver at the
Yeah.
beginning of COVID. And so it was pretty wild, but I could look back and see how many times things could have gone really wrong and just how many miracles were along the way that just kind of helped everything fall into place. So it took us about 3 months after that to get moved in. And then once we got moved in, we expanded the mother-in-law suite that's at the home that we're at now because it wasn't quite big enough for my mom and dad. And so, dealing with the construction and all the other stuff, it's a real encyclopedia of life, experience.
In a very condensed period of time, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. And I had, kids in school, and my son actually only ended up staying in high school, his whole high school career, for about 5 weeks because we got so concerned with COVID and being that my dad was going to be going through chemo
Yeah.
soon that we're like, it's just not worth it. So he came home to do school. So, collectively, we as a family, we've made a lot of sacrifices to make it work, and we don't regret it a bit.
Good. Well, I'm so grateful to hear that there isn't regret because I think it can be difficult, right? When those, I think that consolidating of homes and even just being a caregiver can impact our lives in lots of different ways. And it sounds like, from my understanding, you're the primary caregiver, but it sounds like you've got some, the benefit of having lots of people in the same home is that different people step up in different ways.
Yes. Yes, my kids are involved in the care of my parents. Now, there are certain things you don't want kids to have to kind of endure or, handle that's more than what's age appropriate.
Yeah.
However, my kids are all adults now, and so they're pretty confident at being able to step up and help with various different things. And so, just having that closeness relationship with my mom and dad because they live with us
Yeah.
has been an extra bonus. And just really getting to know them as people. I didn't have that growing up. We always lived in areas where we were far away from my grandparents, and so having my kids be that close to my parents has really been wonderful for them to have a really close personal relationship.
Yeah, I have young parents, as I've shared in previous conversations. And so I got a lot of time with grandparents, and that's very meaningful. And I feel very grateful for that because, my mom, when I talked to her, she was more like you. She didn't get a chance to be around her grandparents, and she only saw them once, usually every year, every couple of years. And so, whereas for me, I often would see them, especially growing up, sometimes daily, if not at least every, a couple times a week. So, that's fantastic. And I'm glad that they're also there to help support you because it's, as you know, like the sandwich life, there's a lot to it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I learned stuff from my parents daily. My dad would say something really profound, and I'd be like, wow, well, why haven't I figured that out by now? But, he has a lot more years of life experience. And so it also kind of helped me gain perspective on the cycle of life and just appreciating where I am and where my kids are and where my parents are, and just learning to enjoy every minute that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. Enjoy every minute. So true. So I want to lean into, I know that ultimately your father did pass. You share that he had cancer. And
Mhm.
I want to kind of walk through one of the things that stood out was you had shared that about 8 months, I think, before his passing, you had started to really lean into what are his wishes, right? What were kind of his goals for end of life, but also things that he wanted to have happen. Can you kind of walk us through that journey?
Right. So we had a lot of tough conversations, what people like to say tough conversations. When we celebrate your life at your funeral life celebration, what do you want to have happen? How do you want to be remembered? Who do you want to speak? We had the details down to other than the date. And that was really helpful for me because it took all the guesswork out. What would dad want? Well, what if he wanted this or what if he wanted that? So that was really big. We talked with him about, he did have a will, but we kind of did some fine tuning on it. Well, who do you want to have this and who do you want to have that? And so he says, well, I know this person has real sentimental value for this niece or nephew, his grandchildren. So, just to be able to, get his clear wishes on things that he wanted people to have, either possessions or rights to something, to have that, concrete and in place so there wouldn't be any confusion on that. And then, the other thing I realized is he was kind of reflecting on his life and he had some regrets and some concerns. And so, when it would just be him and me, my mom would be out running errands, I'd be sitting next to him and I'd say, oh, Dad, tell me about this time, and just to kind of talk to him about what his worries were when he was a child and or a young adult, or my dad was a police officer for 34 years. There's a lot of stuff that he didn't tell me about that had happened in his career until he was in his twilight, like till he moved in with us. And you just don't know what people are carrying because you're not there all the time. And so it was really good for him to unpack those things and to kind of let go of worries, fears, or regrets and just kind of then just enjoy being present. And wherever he was, he used to say, I'm riding a buck and bronco, and when I'm off, I'm off. Like, like he knew that his last 8 months were going to be really rough. And so he always had a really good attitude about it. And I think part of that was just giving him space and time to kind of, without judgment, without, other people's expectations, to talk through his fears, regrets, and worries and just lay that all to rest so that he could just be present. And so for me, I feel like because I'm a life coach, that that experience allowed me to be able to give that gift to him end of life. And so he did finally pass, and he passed at home around our family on his terms, which unfortunately a lot of people don't get. And so, for me, although, he's my hero, it was hard for me, I still also had a great sense of peace, knowing that he had peace when he passed and he was doing it on his terms. And so not everyone's going to have that opportunity, but as a caregiver, you can be present. You can hold space, as we say in the coaching world, hold space to allow our loved ones to talk through and work through whatever it is that's bothering them so that they can have peace with the past before they pass on.
Sam, I think I love all of what you've shared, and I think this is even in my own kind of work, right, with how we're trying to build technology to support folks in this space. I really love what you just shared, and I think the difficult conversations are one of the hardest things to help people navigate. And I think that your story just kind of exemplifies the benefits of it for not only the person who is facing, end of life, right, as it's getting nearer, but I think also too as a primary caregiver who was having to make some decisions at the end and obviously right after. I think that we had talked about that, he had a DNR, right? And that was already predetermined. And so that took the guesswork out of difficult moments, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was extremely helpful. He got to a point because of the illness that took him that, there was really no value in doing any heroic effort to save his life. And so we had a DNR, and when he went into hospice, he was in only hospice for about 4 months. They had it on record, and the day he passed, he collapsed on the floor, and my son wasn't at home. My son was at work, so I needed more help to get him back into bed. So we called EMTs, and they came and they put him back into bed, and I showed him the orange sheet. I'm like, hey, if he's gone and we're good. Okay. So he did come back to us for a few hours, but I honestly wasn't sure how I was going to react when that moment came. But because it was something that was just programmed into me, this is what we're doing. It made it easy.
Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing, Sam, especially I think because to your point, you not only have the lived experience, but you're also doing life coaching now in this space. And I think that's a real, gift that you're giving back to others. What are maybe one or two recommendations that you would give other, you know, family caregivers who are helping care for an aging person to start to lean into some of these hard conversations? Do you have like a best practices or a way to start a conversation, or even maybe where to start and what questions to ask first?
Sure, sure. I mean, you want to start with the intention that you want to give them as much control over future choices as possible, and that it's with the intent of loving them in that you want to respect their wishes.
Mm,
So, like, we've had to have the conversation with my mom about driving because she's has early onset dementia,
okay.
and we're still kind of in the process of kind of getting her evaluated for what's really safe for her to do and not to do. And so it started out with me saying, hey, mom, you know, this child needs to go here, or this child's going to be learning to drive soon. Would you mind bringing them with you
Mm,
so that, you can show them the lay of the land and how to look for landmarks and how to navigate without a GPS? It's like we forget,
yeah.
that we had no
Yep.
GPS when we started learning how to drive. It was, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so it started with small things. And then it gradually progressed to, Mom, I'm really concerned about you, how tired you get when you've been up past this hour. And driving may be exhausting. How can I support you? And, I have a really good relationship with my parents. We've always been close. And so it was fairly easy because she said to me, well, I've been kind of concerned about this too. I'm not sure that I should be driving everywhere. So I said, okay, well, mom, if it's within 2 miles of the house and it's a short trip and you feel like you can do it without being anxious or concerned, go for it. But if it's longer than that, or I'm available, I will take you. So she really does very little driving now. About 95% of it's done by me or my husband or someone else close to us, so that if she gets lost or if she starts to feel really tired, then she's not having to carry the burden of, oh, I gotta drive home now and I don't feel well, or I'm just so exhausted I can't do this. And so, it really comes down to saying, hey, I love you and I want you to be safe and I want you to feel good and confident in what you're doing. And I'm here to support you in any way I can. And so a lot of these conversations aren't just like a once and done. It comes in stages. It's like, well, I've noticed this, or, various different things happen. Like, you know, I put my mom on my Costco account so that she could go shopping with me when she feels like it. But if she doesn't, great. Costco's a big place. And some days she's like, yeah, let's go. Other days she's just like, oh, no, 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 I don't want to go to Costco. It's too big. It's too noisy. It's too chaotic. And so, I try to give her options and then allow her to exercise her judgment, her good judgment on how she wants to do things. If she wants to go someplace or if she doesn't, then, I just plan accordingly.
Yeah. I love how you focused on that these are not one and done conversations. As much as some of these harder conversations, we kind of wish it was like, okay, can we go through and check this box on whatever it is, right? Like, what do you want to have if something happens? But it's really not a one and done. And that's been the experience for me as well. It's little by little over time in the right moments, right? And I wanted to loop this back to what you shared about you and your father, right? And having conversations, and that some of the conversations you actually were able to dig in deeper and talk about fears, regrets, etc., even when his wife and your mother weren't around, right? And it was just
Yeah.
the two of you. And I think that that also is such a wonderful approach, because sometimes there are things that we're more comfortable in sharing with different people in different moments. And I think that, the caregivers are probably going to know their people better than others. But I think maybe if it's not working, try talking to them one-on-one, especially if it's both parents, right? Hey, mom, what are you thinking about this? Hey, dad, what are you thinking about this? And then almost like triangulate back to, okay, we've got some difference here. So how do we get them aligned on it? And then how do we bring the conversation together? So great insight. And I really like that. Thank you. I appreciate it. This episode of Sandwiched is brought to you by Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed is a purpose-driven platform helping families navigate aging, caregiving, and legacy planning with ease and compassion. Right now, the first 100 listeners to sign up will receive a free Tumbleweed membership for 1 full year. That's a value of over $100. But once those 100 spots are gone, they're gone. So don't delay. Go to tumbleweedplan.com. That's Tumbleweed Plan, PLAN.com. Click Get Started, fill in your account details, and enter the promo code SANDWICHED. SANDWICHED. Thanks for listening. Now back to today's episode. I know we're here to talk about your experience and share your stories of sandwiched life, but I gotta lean into this. Tell me about your 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. day. That's a long day. How do you get through? How do you manage it? Like, tell us about how that started and how you survive it all.
Well, at the start of this, I had 7 people in my house. And so while, I can depend on my kids to do little things here and there, a lot of it's just having really good habits that support, your priorities. So when I get up in the morning, I take my morning medications. I do kind of like a circuit of the house. I turn lights off and I check my daughter's bathroom, and then I come in and I see my mom, and if she's up, I talk to her. How are you doing? This is what you have on your schedule today, and I will be taking you. Or if it's someone else, like my sister that takes her, my sister will be here at this time to take you. And, in fact, you can see in the background here, I bought a whiteboard so that because she has a hard time remembering.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be putting our weekly schedule on it every week so that she can go to the day and say, oh, we got this. So then what I started doing is I would say, hey, Mom, today's Monday, and we have this going, and, this person's doing this, and this person's doing this. And then, I check in on our, go back to my side of the house and start getting ready for my day. I usually spend a little bit of time on LinkedIn and, checking in with clients. And then I start my 8 a.m. day, and then I'll take a break mid-morning and come check on my mom. How are things doing? How are you guys doing? What was my mom and dad? And can I do anything for you? What are your concerns today? And sometimes my mom will be like, oh, dad needs a prescription to be picked up. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going to be in this area at this time. I'll pick it up. So a lot of it's just kind of coordinating, all the things. So this grocery shopping, it's cleaning, it's picking up prescriptions, it's, going to the post office to pick up mail. These kind of seem like meaningless tasks, but when I am doing things, especially caregiving, I try to pause and kind of connect on a deep level. Like when my dad got to the point, where he really had a hard time doing any walking, and we had to put him in a wheelchair to get to and from the bathroom. I would talk to him and say, hey, how did this go? And I know you watched this, and, kind of fun conversation so that he, was connecting with me on something that was, common to us. Or when he got to a point where he was really sedentary and I was concerned about, swelling in his hands and feet. Well, my dad's feet are, I would say to him, oh, your feet are so beautiful. I wish I had such beautiful feet. And he would laugh because like his feet were so pristine. They just looked 30 years younger than he was. But then, I was a dancer for a lot of years, and my feet are beaten up and chewed up, and, they look horrible because I abused them so badly. And I would say, oh, I wish I had these beautiful feet. And he would laugh, and, I'd check his hands and I'd say, oh, wow, look at this. And, just whatever I could do to kind of connect with him. And
Yeah.
then, in the end, when he was having a really hard time speaking, I'd be like, hey, Dad, you were in the ring with Mike Tyson and he is tough. He threw some good punches at you today, but you are still in this because you have a bigger heart. And he'd
Oh,
smile.
yeah.
And so, just finding little ways as I'm doing these things, doing dishes and cleaning for them and, looking forward to, what doctor's appointments they had to have, or when the hospice nurse came, okay, well, what questions do we have for the hospice nurse? So that I have them ready. So when she comes, I can make sure that they get asked. And then some things were like, with my mom being the lion's share caregiver for my dad, she didn't have a medical degree. And
Yeah.
so, giving morphine to my dad or lorazepam or whatever he had in his regimen,
Hmm.
she wasn't real comfortable with. And so I'd say, okay, Mom, look at this dropper. This is how much he gets of morphine every 3 hours. Or, you know, and I would have to come and check regularly because she'd keep a log. And, some days there was no log. And I'd be like, hey, Mom, when was the last time Dad had some pain relief? And she's like, oh, he didn't ask for some. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. He
Yeah.
needs some. Don't wait for him to ask, just give it. It's okay. It's a small amount. It's not going to hurt him. Oh, okay. So, it's just
Yeah.
kind of one of those things where it's like I'm training the trainer, you
Yep.
know,
Yep. Yep.
and, trying to keep track of all the, like I always have a list on my mom's fridge so that she can write down stuff she needs for groceries, and the same thing on my fridge. So I try to use the same systems for both families so that I can keep track of everything that needs to get done. Um, doctor's appointments and all the other stuff. I mean, it can get really overwhelming. And I finally got to a point where I'm like, somewhere in my day, I've got to carve out 30 minutes for me to exercise,
Yes.
because I'm exhausted and I can't fill from an empty cup. I realized that at one point that I was like, I'm just going through the motions. I'm just going through the tasks and I'm not really present.
Yeah.
And I'm missing opportunities to really connect with my parents on deep ways. And so, I had to remind myself, okay, slow down. I know you got 10,000 things to do, but sit and talk to your dad for 2 minutes or your mom for 2 minutes when they've got something going. And so, you know, it's one of those things where you have to kind of balance the tasks of getting things done and the care of the actual human being, the
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
making sure that their emotional needs, their physical needs, their spiritual needs are met.
Yeah.
And so it's a daily thing. It's not like, well, I've got a hard and fast routine and everything works out perfectly, because most days it doesn't. And it's really taught me that I have to stay focused on what's most important, and even that's my family.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think what really stuck out was I loved how you shared creating moments of joy and connection. And really, I think it really comes from a deep place of love and kind of making that something to get a chuckle out of him. And I think that if I put myself in your father's shoes, right, and a child was telling me that, I think I would chuckle too, but I think it would also make me feel special at the same time, and I think that those really created some deep moments of connection. So I've really loved that. And I think also too, what you shared, and I want to dive into that a little bit more, is I believe it was, if memory serves, earlier this year, you had a scare yourself where you thought that you might have a health issue. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that taps into kind of the identifying, oh, I've got to find 30 minutes in a day for me too.
So took me a while to kind of unpack this because it all happened so fast. But one night I had this nightmare that I was carjacked
Oh, wow.
and that I had nothing. I had no phone, no keys, no car, no nothing. And I didn't really know where I was. And I couldn't figure out how to help myself. And I woke
Mm,
up and I felt like I was having a cardiac episode. It wasn't like
yeah.
really a heart attack, but it's more like orthostatic hypotension or
Okay.
something like that. And so my blood pressure was really crazy and I blacked out and I kept blacking out. And So I went in the hospital and they ran their battery of tests and they're like, well, we can't find anything. We'll keep you for a couple of days to make sure everything is okay, but we just think it's stress. We think you're just
Yeah.
exhausted. And so I was like, oof, because I can be gone for a day, maybe two, away from my family, and they can get by, but past that, they can't. Like,
Yeah.
I learned how to work and repair my dad's oxygen concentrator. And it could go out at any time. There were times
Yeah.
in the middle of the night it would go out. I had to get up out of bed, put him on portable oxygen, because he was on 100% oxygen
Okay.
100% of the time. And, do that to where it was like I was terrified to be away from home
Yeah.
any period of time because my family needs me, right? And so I realized I've just got to do more to take care of myself. And part of that experience was also realizing, that my dad was my hero, and he's like the best problem solver I know. Like, you put anything in front of him, he's like, yeah, I got it. I can do this. And he was so adept and so confident at it that I finally had to come to the conclusion that, I was afraid of losing him
Mm.
because it was part of who I was. It was part of, that if I felt like I had a question, oh, one of the kids is doing this and I don't know what to do. And he'll be like, well, if you ask me, so I really heavily depended on him for advice
Yeah.
and for, kind of as a partner in problem solving. And then I came to the conclusion that, well, he already taught me everything that he knows, and that I can do this by myself, that eventually he will pass
Yeah.
and it will be me taking care of me and me doing all those things. And I'm okay. I can do those things. I've already proven I can do things that I didn't know before. And so it was okay. And so that was kind of a double blessing, for
Yeah.
me to say, okay, it's time to slow down, take care of me. And it's okay. You got this. The unexpected is going to happen, but I have enough tools and I'm confident enough in myself that I'll figure it out.
Well, I'm so sad that it happened to you, right? And I'm so grateful to an extent as well that it did, because I think it allowed you to have some deep reflection and understand, luckily it was not a cardiac issue, as it very easily could have been. Stress is, very hard on the body. But I think it created a moment of pause and reflection for you. And I think what was so beautiful about what you shared is you had used the term Superman with your dad in one of our earlier conversations. And I am hearing, and you shared this as well, that he was really someone you look up to and has really been an anchor in your life, right? And I think that he lives on through you and the stories you're sharing. So not only did it teach you the lessons, but I think you're bringing the lessons forward. And I imagine you're sharing them with the next generation, whether it's with your family or even in conversations like this, as well as in your coaching practice. So I just wanted to call out that I'm seeing some dad in you, Sam. So I wanted to just share that with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're reflecting back on so many experiences, what are some of the most important lessons that you feel that being a family caregiver has and or is teaching you?
I've learned a lot of really, really good lessons that have really kind of grown me. You're going to grow a lot as a family caregiver. You're going to be pushed out of your comfort zone daily. And so it's a journey of significant growth. And you're not going to always know everything. And you're going to figure out how to find the tools and the resources to figure it out. I skipped medical school. I didn't do that. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a financial expert. But as we've been through this journey, I've learned that you got to have help. You got to have, people who you trust, who have expertise that you don't, teach you, coach you, advise you. And that was really helpful. Like the hospice nurse,
Hmm.
the nurses that took care of my dad, they were very helpful in, allowing me to gain confidence in the whole process so that, I could coach my mom and
Yeah.
oversee his care at home while they were away. We're human. We're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I put too much pressure on myself that I had to meet every single need perfectly, that my mom and dad could never be disappointed and they could never be, you know, sad about anything, and that I had to fix everything. And that's not our job. Our job is to love them and walk with them through, pain and discomfort and disappointment. But, we usually have very little control over the outcome. Like, there was nothing on the planet that anyone could have done to give my dad more time.
Yeah.
He had what he had, but I had a choice. Let's make the best of it that we can, whatever it is. And so I think as caregivers, we learn to discern what I have control over, what I have influence over, and what I don't. And when I don't have any control, how does my response, make it a better experience for my family? Because I could be upset, I could be angry, or I could say, okay, we're going to make this great. Like
Yeah.
my dad's last Christmas and Thanksgiving, we did it big. We made it a lot of fun for him. We brought family in at Thanksgiving. We did family pictures, and we really made it an enjoyable experience for him. And his birthday's right before Christmas, so we had a big party at our house for him. I mean, not too big, so it didn't overwhelm him, but we had gifts and we made a special meal, and
Yeah.
we just did whatever
Memorable.
we could to make it personal and impactful and meaningful to him. And so I think that's another thing that for family caregivers, it's like we are all limited in the resources, the time, the energy that we have. So, give yourself the grace to say, I did
Yes.
the best I could.
Yes. I want to really double click on that as someone who only in the last few years realized that I've been a family caregiver almost my entire life, three-quarters of it now at this point, right? Um, it was, I think when you grow up, and I grew up in a situation where I was the eldest and my mom was with mental illness. And so I often had to step in, especially when she was institutionalized, and then often before or after, because mental health is a difficult journey, right? And so caregiving with mental health looks different and similar in some ways, right? There was lots of feedings, activities of daily living, right? Like, mom, you need to take a bath. Like, it's been a few days and this is not good for your mental health, right? Things like that. But I think that, like you, I fell into, especially early on, feelings of needing to be perfect and to do it all right. But you're right. Like, I was not trained in these spaces. It was not like I went to school on how to be a professional, I was not a therapist. I was not a psychiatrist. I was not a mental health care worker, although I think those things impacted my later journey in education, right? I went to school for psychology. I worked in healthcare for 20 years. So I think there was a connection there. Um, but it really is something that I think that as caregivers, and I hear and see this so often, and I just really wanted to lean into it, is you've got to give yourself grace. Like, you are going to make mistakes. We are going to have hard days. I had a conversation with another family caregiver who shared a very personal story about a difficult interaction with him and his grandmother, right? And it was just heat of the moment and they were arguing, and it really reminded me of some difficult moments I've been in as well. And it was like, we're still human at the end of the day. Like, this is overwhelming. And as long as we remember, like, we care about these people and it's going to be okay. And they're going to be let down sometimes, right? Just like kids are, right? I mean, I think sometimes there are things where with my grandparents and even my mom, it's like, hey, I want to do those things for you. But to your point, I don't have time. I don't have resources, or maybe I don't even have the financial ability to do some of those things, right? And those are just the realities of our life. And so I think that we have to be able to sometimes let people down, but say, it's not that I don't care, it's just not possible.
Right. Yeah. And we can't be all things to all people,
Yeah.
but we prioritized our best for the people we love the most.
I loved that you really identified it sounds like with your father's, kind of journey towards the end, that you really took moments of in tiny little things, right? Just taking him to the bathroom. Hey, dad, like, how's your day going? Like using that kind of couple minute conversation to just connect, or also making moments bigger, right? You talked about Thanksgiving and his birthday to make it even more special, and Christmas. And I think that those things are so fantastic. I am curious, did you have an inclination that that was likely going to be his final year? Like these would be his final big moments at that point?
Yeah. Well, because I've been so heavily involved in his care, and I, and this is another thing I recommend, is to get in the trenches with the specialists, the doctors,
Mm-hmm.
talk with them, build a rapport with them, build a relationship with them, because it was the relationship that I built with his specialist that gave me the confidence and the courage to reach out and say, okay, he's at this point, and I think that he's ready for hospice. Can you tell me, you know, whether or not you agree with this, and if you don't, tell me why. And they were all in agreement, yep, he's ready. So like I knew, I could tell just how much he'd slowed down compared to other years,
Yeah.
that he was having a significant decline. And then again, never having been through the process of, hospice intake or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that, I was able to be confident in, the date we pulled the trigger on it and said, yep, we're doing this today. And the other part was because I had been so involved with his care, and I had all the information for all of his diagnosis, and, how long he'd had conditions and the doctors and all that. Like literally the day that we brought hospice in, he was approved in an hour. So,
Yep.
that was really phenomenal, not to have to
Yeah.
go, well, wait a week or two
Yep.
and go, well, is he going to get approved? Is he not? Because we had everything in order, organized, that it made the whole process a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. I am curious because what you just shared about, not only staying close to the specialist, but also recognizing some of the decline. I know you shared that your mom was also very involved in your father's caregiving. Did your mom see it as well? Were you having those conversations?
Yes, and we would talk about it daily.
Okay.
If she noticed something different or something unusual, she would say, "Oh, I noticed that when Dad was telling this story, my dad was a great storyteller. I mean, you can imagine in 34 years of police work, he
Yeah,
had some really great stories to
I'm
tell."
sure. Absolutely.
And she would say, "Yeah, this story turned into this, and then this, and then this." Like he had lost like time continuity, and he would tell the story in the wrong order, or he would tell four different stories and say that they were all the same story. And so I'd be like, "Yeah, that's different. That's definitely additional decline." And so, just daily. I mean, I so appreciate my siblings. We have this like daily chat, and we're texting each other updates like daily. Dad did
Yeah.
this, Mom said this, and so like they had a minute by minute play practically
Yeah.
on everything that was going on, so that they were kind of really aware. And then, that last 8 months, we finally, as daughters, we were doting on our dad, and he appreciated that. But when we got to the point where the three of us realized, my sisters and I, that this was it for dad, we called our brothers and we said, okay, we know you're far away, but we're giving you advance notice. Please come at Thanksgiving, please. Or if you can't come at Thanksgiving, come at Christmas and spend some quality time with dad, because he's not going to make it another holiday season. And so, having that advanced preparation and, advanced knowledge was really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I asked that question because, my great aunt, who I actually lived with at a period of time when I was younger, she was living with my grandmother with the last 10 years of her life. They were sisters, they lived together. And they were in Arizona. I was in California at the time. And I would, at that time, I was coming to Arizona probably every few months on average for different things. And my aunt had had a couple of different healthcare related incidents. And I was there for about a week on one visit. And I told my grandmother, I was like, Gram, you do realize that Aunt Linda is starting to let go. And I remember this moment, my grandma was like, no, she's not, like, she's getting healthier. And I was like, Graham, I spent a lot of years in healthcare. I was like, I know Aunt Linda very well. I said, the signs are here that she's basically saying, I'm going to start letting my body naturally start the process of essentially dying. Like, dying in some situations can be a choice, right? A lot of researchers, a lot of people, to your point, who work in hospice, death doulas, right? They really understand this. And I think it was hard for my grandmother when I shared that, but her and I've talked about it since. And I think it actually forced her to recognize and be more honest with the reality, because it wasn't 4 or 5 months later that she passed, right? And it was, I could see it. I could see the decline. I could see the release of kind of the holding on. And I don't know that that's the case with everybody, but with her, I definitely really saw it. And I asked a question about your mother, because my grandmother, I think, had a little bit of denial about it. Right. And it kind of took a secondary caregiver and someone who knew her, my great aunt, very well, to be able to say, like, no, Graham, like, the signs are here, and I want you to start to mentally prepare yourself for what is coming. And so I'm grateful that not only that you had your mother who was also there with you, but also I love that your siblings were involved and they're supporting you even just via text message, because sadly, that's not always the case. It's not always been the case in my family and situations that I've been involved in, but I'm grateful that you've had that with your siblings.
Yes, me too. And, like your aunt and your mom and your grandmother, that situation where the main caregiver is like, no,
Yeah.
they're going to get better. Things are getting better. And you're like, no.
Yeah.
That happened with my mom, and I had to remind her frequently. She says, well, what if we did this? Well, Mom, we already talked about this.
Yeah.
The specialist already said this won't make a difference, and it's okay. He's ready, and
Yeah.
and we're here for him, and everything will be okay. So I just had to kind of remind her and reassure her that everything was okay. And when he started sleeping more, she'd be like, "Oh, I'm really worried. He's sleeping more." I said, "Well, that's the body's natural process. And when you're sleeping, it's easier to process oxygen. So this makes sense."
Yeah.
So, helping it reframe it, from a positive and expected way really helped her kind of accept, yep, he's gonna go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for better or for worse, right? I do feel like the gift of, them starting to be less mobile, but also to sleep more. I think it also allows those of us that are around them more closely to prepare for some of the harder moments, and to also allow time for us to get more energy, right? Because I think about different moments where I feel like I'm actually so grateful that some of that slowing down did happen, because it allowed me to kind of also decompress a little bit more and get prepared for some of those harder moments. So I think that, naturally, I think it is also helpful for the people who are most closely in those situations.
Agreed.
Yeah. Sam, not only are you a family caregiver, you've got 3 children, you've got your mom, but you also have a corporate job. Tell me a little bit about, your work life. I believe you shared that you get to work from home, which is fantastic. But what has it been like trying to navigate, your own career growth, as well as trying to maintain everything else in your life?
Career for me has been a bit of a challenge. When you have the kind of responsibility that you and I carry, you have to make some choices.
Yeah.
And for me, it was that I stay where I am, and that I am not making any significant deviations in the hours that I work or the role that I work. And I've been really grateful because my boss is also a family caregiver. And so she's been very understanding and very willing to allow me to be flexible with going to lunch or taking time off, whatever it is that I needed to do. She's always been really understanding. And I think for a lot of people, that beyond the fact of, okay, I'm not going to experience any major career growth, I'm putting that on the back burner. But then also figuring out, okay, well, doctor's offices are open during
Yeah.
regular business hours.
Yep.
There's no evening and weekend doctors. So
Yep.
I got to take time off during my business day. So trying to juggle that and, meet those needs can be really challenging. And so for me, I have a sister that lives fairly close and a couple of nieces that live fairly close. So occasionally one of them will come and take my mom someplace or take her to an appointment and kind of help out. But by and large, it's been on me. So I've had to be really mindful about, okay, I have this doctor's appointment, but I have also these time sensitive tasks for work that have to get done. Like my work for my job has to get done because people depend on me, And so it's been a really eye-opening experience for me how hard it is for people who are caregivers part-time or even full-time to have to balance full-time work and still fit everything that needs to get done in a regular 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 workday and still fit the doctor's appointments, the pharmacy visits, whatever else you have to do that's only in business hours, to find a balance between those. And then I think we talk about balance and say, oh, they're balanced, they're even, but every day the scales are never quite balanced. There's one thing or another that takes more of your time. There are some days where, like, I have less availability to step away from my corporate job because, it's time sensitive, it's critical. And so I have to say, okay, well, I need to do other things, during the day, for my lunch hour instead. And so I'm going to get these critical things done. And some days I skip lunch because I'm like, it just has to get done. And so, you have to be really flexible. But my big concern for the people in my position is that a lot of us don't have corporations or employers, small business employers that really understand what it's like to be us. And, we need the flexibility and the willingness on our employer's part to say, okay, this person's a valuable team member. This person's brings value to our company, and they are also a caregiver. And if I give them flexibility or, better benefits or something like that, then it would make us thrive in both worlds. And so it's, they're always intertwined. There's not like this is my corporate box, this is my family box. They're kind of always, you know, intertwined with each other, and, trying to separate them is, kind of a lost cause. And so, when people say life work balance, I really kind of say life work integration,
Yes.
because, they're just not separate. You have to integrate them in a way that they're complementary to each other.
Yes, I'm so glad you called that out because it's exactly what I was thinking. I think work-life balance is like the ideal, but I think work-life integration is the reality, right? And I'm so grateful and happy to hear that you work for a leader and an organization that is supportive and understanding, right? And that doesn't mean that they expect any less of you as an employee, right? It just means that they're more willing to flex to some of the, like, hey, I've got to take a funky lunchtime to be able to take my mom to an appointment, right? But I'll work later or I'll start earlier. And I think that it does a couple of things. One is that, the flex and being flexible and the integration, one, it creates and ensures that the work still gets done and they don't need to bring in another part-time support or even to replace you. But I think also, too, one of the biggest benefits of corporations, and having worked in HR a lot of my career, that I try and always share is one of the biggest concerns with employers is turnover and loss in productivity, and also, too, cost of replacing a good employee. Well, from my conversations with the folks that I've had conversations with here at Sandwiched and beyond, where the organizations lean in and find creative ways to help support their family caregiving employees, those are employees for life. Like, those are ones where it's like, oh, wow, like, I want to stay here. I'm so committed. And then it becomes words of mouth, right? Like, I work for this company and they really get it. And they have policies around not only just FMLA, but also they have caregiver bereavement hours, or, they have a benefit that's specific to offering solutions for caregiver mental health resources, like whatever. There's so many creative things that are coming out. And so to any of our listeners that may work in corporate roles or in decision-making roles around employee population, like the benefits far outweigh the cost of supporting your family caregivers, right? And the stats today are 1 in 5 adults are caring for an aging person. And that aging person is broadly defined as either someone that's a parent, grandparent, or friend, but it could even be an adult child maybe who has some sort of disability, right? And we're having that a lot more. And it's going to be 1 in 3 by 2040. So that means that a third of our employee population are going to need this. So we've got to start creating better solutions. And the other thing too, Samantha, that you shared that I wanted to just share with listeners that they may not realize is there's a lot of studies on family caregivers from an economic impact, right? How much, not only if we were paying family caregivers at an hourly rate and a pretty low one, how much economics that actually impacts our GDP here in the US. Not only, though, on the flip side of that is also what the loss that individuals who are family caregivers experience in not being able to take on new promotions or be able to go to a new job that maybe comes with more responsibility and more money. Like the last stat that I saw was about $300,000 that the average family caregiver loses in compensation caring for one individual, right? We're not talking about 2, 3, or 4. We're talking about one caregiver role. And so, I think that it's important that we talk about these things and we put numbers to it sometimes, because I think it's easy to say like, oh, like it's their decision. Like, they went part-time. Most family caregivers don't want to go part-time. It's a necessity because things get too overwhelming or they don't have supportive organizations. So I'm so grateful that you experienced the positive and that you're like me trying to share with the world, like, here are the benefits of it. Like, here's why you want to wrap your arms around the family caregivers. Because, man, I think if we've learned anything from Sam today, they can balance a lot. They are amazing jugglers and problem solvers. So let's just listen to Sam and let that be like, if they can do all this, think about what they can do in our companies.
Right. Family caregivers have tremendous IQ and EQ skills. We are great leaders. We are the calm in the storm. And we have a lot to teach our colleagues and those that report to us.
Absolutely. Sam, would you mind, from your perspective, I love that you shared EQ. Would you just give our listeners who may not know what that is, just kind of a high level from your perspective, what that is and how it benefits the world?
From a perspective of both family caregiving, but what we as family caregivers bring to the corporate world, resilience. I have learned resilience in spades, and that's also translated into my job, being able to handle the unusual situations and having hard conversations. I've learned to have really hard conversations with people, whether it's about work or about a personal situation, and have it in a way that's compassionate and kind, and not judgmental.
Yes.
For family caregivers, we have to be really good at communicating what needs to get done and, urgency, and be really clear and concise in our communication, because we depend on other people to help us get everything done. And so that's another really big bonus for corporations. The other thing is future pacing. It's, especially when you have a loved one who's, in 2 or 3 years, they're going to be significantly declined. You have to have conversations with them to say, okay, well, we're not here yet, but we need to plan for this. So looking ahead, how do you want to handle this? What decisions do you want to make now? And so we are always looking ahead to the future and anticipating problems that are going to happen so that we have a plan already in place before those things happen. So family caregivers have a wide variety of skills. There are times when, my parents, my dad especially, I could see that he was fully mentally there and I could have a complex conversation with him. And at other times it was like talking to the small child, where I had to alter my words and my communication style down to a 6-year-old boy, and so we have a lot of skills that are very valuable, that are not just great for caregiving to make the caregiving process easy and enjoyable, but also are really powerful, impactful skills for the corporate world.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, I think what I resonated with me and also what I heard was it's a bit of a chameleon, right? I think to your story with your dad, like one moment you're having a conversation that's very complex, very in depth, and then maybe later that evening you're having a conversation that would be at a 6-year-old level, right? And I think that recognition and realization of, okay, here's where this person is in this moment, let's quickly flip the script, and okay, I've got to approach the conversation a little bit differently, and the words I use, the way I interact needs to evolve relatively rapidly. So yes, thank you. I love that you shared that, and I think that it really exemplifies all the benefits, right, that organizations can actually appreciate and get to experience by creating spaces that welcome folks who are family caregivers. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Sam, if you could share one or maybe two key takeaways from your personal story, maybe even some of your coaching experiences with our listeners, what would you share?
Be intentional. A lot of the stuff that we do is, the ADLs, the tasks, and we know that has to get done, but be intentional about your conversations and your presence with your family members, because you just don't know how long you have. You might have 10 years, you might have 6 months. There's really no guarantee. And so pause and take time each time you're with your loved ones to be present, to be intentional. We can't control the outcomes, but we can control our attitude. We can control how we meet that situation, how we're meeting our loved one where they are. And just love your family members. Just love them, and just be appreciative for every minute that you get, because there are millions of people all over the world that don't have the ability to be a one-on-one caregiver with their loved ones and would love the opportunity, and they don't get that time and that connection with their families that they would really love. And so it's a privilege. And so always try to remember how blessed you are, like how lucky you are to have the opportunity to have that close personal one-on-one relationship with your loved ones, and just be present with it.
I love that. Thank you. And for any of our listeners who maybe have not heard the term ADLs, those are activities of daily living. And so Sam and I talk about that probably quite often in our daily roles in caregiving. But that's really kind of the activities that all of us do in a given day. And it's how we assess aging and limitation. So just wanted to kind of circle on that piece. But also too, I think that thank you for that, Sam. I look at my experience, and I'll talk about my mother here and being a family caregiver for someone who battles mental illness. And it is a battle. It is literally a battle. There are beautiful, wonderful moments, and it's really allowed me to approach the world in a very different way. Right. I am not always perfect at it, but I do work really hard to realize that all of our mental cognition and everything that's happening in here in our brains is a little different for all of us. Right. And so I try and think about that actually brings a lot of uniqueness and experience for all of us. But I think also too, it's a good remembrance to try and find joy in the little things and in the moments of positive, right? And so I think that definitely it really kind of made me reflect, and I wanted to just share my appreciation of that. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. You are a wonderful, amazing caregiver. What you went through is tremendously stressful. It's in every way. And so Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. And to our listeners out there who are maybe new to caregiving or have been lifetime caregivers, we see you, we feel your experience, and find community. I think that really was kind of what brought about the Sandwich podcast. And I love that you and I met through, we actually met through LinkedIn. You had posted something and I was like, oh my gosh, like I love what she's doing. And I'm not sure if you reached out first or I did, but I was like, oh wow, like I love that our circles are growing and there's more people talking about this space, because I think that's one of the biggest opportunities is we need to start talking about this more, with our aging population. I think changes in legislation with things like Medicare and Medicaid, I think the family caregivers are going to step up more and more, with not only with decisions, but also to navigating this journey. So, Sam, thank you so much for joining us on Sandwich today. I'm grateful for your time and all of your wonderful wisdom and lived experience. Before we say goodbye for now, any final words or any resources you would like to share with our listeners?
Family caregivers have a lot of resources available, and a lot of it's just knowing it, like knowing that it's there and available. AARP.org is a great place. And there's lots of people within, like on LinkedIn, that have expertise in geriatric care or elder care planning, or, the hospital side of it, like the medical side of it, because we're not experts at everything.
Yeah.
And we have a big learning curve to jump. So I would say be willing to find tools and resources that help, shorten that journey for you so that you can focus on taking care of your loved ones instead of having to do mindless research.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Sam, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us on today's episode of Sandwiched. We look forward to seeing you again next Friday. Thank you so much. Sandwiched is a Second Act Studio production with support from Tumbleweed. We couldn't do this without the support of our production team, Maddie Willis, Brennan Plank, and our interns, Eileen O'Doherty and Anthony Cano. Thanks for listening, and remember, you are not alone. Have a great one.